Well, that little band from the Isle of Wight, Wet Leg, has now won 2 Grammys. That's right. They've won the Alternative Album of the Year as well as the Alternative Song of the Year with Chaise Lounge. Today, I thought we'll talk about the Grammys itself and the achievement of Wet Leg doing that, as well as what's next and the impending task of potentially coming up with a follow-up to that album that we reviewed last year that won the Indie Miners Album of the Year. So, Wet Leg, if you are watching, please contact us. There is a T-shirt for you to pick up. Al, good morning to you. Reflecting on the last 10 winners of this Grammy Album of the Year, this is really a bit of a sea change, isn't it, really, in the, I guess, the type of winner that we're seeing?
Absolutely. If you're having a look at the past 10 years, the frequent winners were Beck, Vampire Weekend, but I think Wet Leg have just come out of the blocks, and I think this Grammy Award really represents a bit of a sea change, pardon the pun, Beck, in terms of that new sound that's kind of coming out from England and the Isle of Wight. And you could tell by the girls' reaction going up to receive the award, as timid as they were, and whether they were under the influence of anything else, who knows, but they were quite shocked and quiet about it. Mate, you and I celebrated. We had a drink to celebrate the girls' win, and I'd be interested in your thoughts looking at the list of the previous winners, conversation points around what made those albums so good compared to 2023's Wet Leg's self-titled album. What are your thoughts?
Look, it's interesting. I mean, I had a look, and they're probably, for me, they weren't quite as what I'd be considering an interesting alternative album. I think there were plenty more of those last 10. It feels like to win a Grammy, you need to be around for 50 years. Like I've noticed just it was on the Wikipedia page that Paul McCartney got nominated for an alternative album of the year back in 2000. This is something different. We've got a band that has won it the first time. As far as I can see, there's probably only 2 bands that have won it the first time, and Niles Barkley, the other one, you would argue that they were around the traps around about then. I actually see that, look, this album is probably the most interesting alternative album of the year, probably since In Rainbows by Radiohead. Before that, there's obviously a mixed bag of really good albums and ones you're scratching your head and saying, well, aren't they sort of just more mainstream in terms of being a rock record? But look, for me, this is a big changing of the guard. I just sort of see that it was a very exciting album. There was not a bad song off the record. And again, we reviewed that last year.
Yep.
Al, very interested to sort of hear your thoughts on the actual ceremony itself. I mean, there were lots of things. I mean, the one thing that I thought that was very interesting was the interview. I don't know if you saw the interview. There was 2 questions. There was only 2 questions that the media could ask the band, and it went for all of about 90 seconds. So I might show you a link to that in the top right. Yeah, there were some bizarre things that I just sort of noted just with the acceptance speeches and all of that.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, I think the fact that the girls were just so shocked, A, to be nominated, and B, to actually receive the award when there are such artists out there who really were just as good, potentially. It's a big thing. And for a band to come all the way over from the Isle of Wight to collect this award, I don't know, mate, does that mean that we are going to be hearing some similar kind of sounds come out from the UK like we mentioned in our previous review? It would be fantastic. I personally think it takes a lot for a debut album, to win an award like this. And I think they successfully created an album that not only satisfied the markets in terms of England and Australia, but cracked that lucrative US market, and good on the girls for doing that. I'm really interested in, as I always am, in the second album, the difficult follow-up album, and where to from here. And I think there's some interesting points that you're going to mention, BJ, in terms of what you're thinking for 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, look, I mean, some of the interesting information that I've been able to pick up on is that last year they toured 161 times. They've got another 50 concerts going through to August. So it seems as if they're not going to be able to begin that writing and recording process until then. So I think by that stage, they're obviously going to be pretty much sick to death. One would think of singing and going through the material that they've had for all of these years now. It's probably been a couple of years on the road. The parts that I'm sort of interested in is that they are going to be touring with Harry Styles, so they're going to be support of that. So I've got a question as to how, I guess, the Harry Styles market will perceive Wet Leg. Interested to know. I just don't. Well, let's see. I mean, I've never really listened to One Direction, and I'm not going to anytime soon. But equally, will the One Direction fans out there like what Wet Leg have to say? The other part to it is whether the stories that they tell in the album, whether they can actually tell the same stories, right, with the second album. I mean, what have they been doing for the last couple of years? I mean, they haven't been, going out to bars and missing out on boyfriends and doing all those regular things that just sort of come up in the album and make it a really interesting listen. They've been touring, right? So I mean, is this going to be one of these albums where it's going to be sort of a tired, on the road, singing about, those types of things sometimes get a little bit tiresome. And then probably the other thing is whether producers are going to get a hold of them, and there's going to be a much more of a requirement to write much more mainstream pop songs. I worry about that. I think that they've got a lot of flair, and what I'm really hoping for with the next album is that they continue on that journey, because it's really exciting to listen to, and I think that went into a lot of the ways as to why they actually won the Grammy.
Yeah, and my tip is, mate, that they've already written the second album. I reckon they've got enough material in their day-to-day lives to write 4 or 5 albums off the cuff. I reckon there'll be songs around, receiving the Grammy Award, maybe under the influence and just simply not giving a shit. And I think that the girls' power is going to be within keeping their sound, but also not being afraid to do new things, and maybe not following the recipe of maybe what the producers and album directions of other people want it to be. I think these girls are absolutely fantastic, and I cannot wait for the next album.
That wraps up another episode of Indie Miners. Please look to subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, and let us know if there's an album you would like us to look at. So until next time, bye for now, and thank you for watching.